Hello, class. So this week we're going to cover chapters 1 and 2. Starting off with chapter 1, the context of social work research. So the objectives for this chapter is to articulate the role of research in social work. We're going to discuss the alternatives. We're going to discuss the alternatives to knowledge-based and research. We're going to describe how research can be used to empower both social workers and the people they endeavor to help. We're going to summarize the position of social work's professional organizations on the use of research in social work. We're going to describe the concept of evidence-based practice, and we're going to identify the types of career opportunities that research skills afford the entry-level social worker. So why should we study research? Okay, I know a lot of students don't really like research. It is a tough subject, but hopefully once we go over chapter 1, you'll understand why we even study social work, why we even study research in social work. So research is important because it provides services that work and are cost effective. So research informs whether you're providing services adequately or if they're even working, and find different ways where you can provide those services cost effectively. It also helps to effectively influence social policy and social work practice. So research is important. Research is important because it also informs policy, and so it can help provide a new policy or improve a policy that would benefit services provided in social work practice. It also is important because funders expect us to do it. So if you have an organization, agency where you get funding for your services, you will have to show research and have to show that your program is effective. It is also needed for grant writing. So whenever you're writing a grant, you have to show the literature in there. So basically, while writing a grant, you have to provide some kind of evidence that what you're talking about is working. If you're doing a grant for a specific service or a specific program, you have to provide some kind of evidence that why this program would be the perfect fit, or why is this program important, or how is this program effective. It also enhances the profession's prestige and legitimacy. So basically, it shows, if you show that something's working, and you can provide evidence that your program is successful, it also adds to that prestige for that profession. It also increases understanding about your services and program. And last one, curiosity, right? If you're curious about a topic, if you're curious about why something happens or why things happen this way, or someone's behavior or anything like that, curiosity can lead you to go seek more information, right? Do research on your own. Research is empowering. So research helps us to improve our practice. It helps us to use interventions that have been shown to be effective. So a good way to know whether your program is working is to look for evidence. So usually when agencies have new programs, they usually do an evaluation at the end of a year, or especially if they're getting funding, they would have to do an evaluation to see how the program's doing and whether if it was effective or not. And so that's what research does for us. It helps us to see whether our programs are working or not. It also critically assesses research evidence, and it also documents our practice results. So research helps us in our practice. It also demonstrates to not only to you, to your clients, to policymakers, to funders, and even to the general public that you are making a difference. So there's so many different ways of knowing things. The first one is tradition. So tradition is something that's just the way it's always been done. That's the way it is, right? So the fork goes to the left. That's been tradition. That's how we set the table. Social agreement. Men wear a suit, women don't. It's just been something that society has accepted and just the way society sees things. Sometimes we just don't even think about it. We just go with the flow because that's just kind of what we know society sees or how society looks at things. The other one is authority. So authority has to do with, the person in charge. So if someone in authority tells you something, you're going to believe it because you feel that, okay, they know what they're talking about because, they're in authority. They know these things. They have experience in it. Intuition, I feel it in my heart. So with intuition, it's just you go with your gut. Experience is when you've done it a certain way or you've done it, so been there, done that, right? So you have the experience, and so you can take what you've learned from that experience and say, I'm doing it this way because from my experience, this is what I know is going to happen. And then finally, scientific method, which is the research way. So people can use any one of these methods to know things and get knowledge and learn different things. And then the final one is a scientific method, which is what we're going to use in this class. Then there's the research process. So there's 5 different steps in the research process. The first one is to identify a problem. So before you even start to do research, the first thing you come up with is what is the problem, right? Once you identify that there is a problem, then you're going to move on to step 2, which is to define that problem in terms of an actual question that has the capacity for a study. So once you figure out there's a problem, so for example, let's say the problem is depression, okay? So you identify a problem of depression. The next step, once you figure out that, there is a problem, you're going to define that in terms of a question that you can actually do a study on. So what about depression that you want to find out, right? What is it about depression that you want to study? Once you do that, then you're going to develop a plan to answer the question. So once you have your question, what is the plan? How are you going to answer that question? So for example, if your question was, let's see, what are the effects of depression? Okay. Or what are the causes of depression? Let's say that's your question. How are you going to answer that? Now you have to come up with a plan to be able to answer those questions. Once you have your plan laid out as to how you're going to get to your answer, you're going to gather data, okay? And you're going to gather data that's basically kind of how the whole research process works, right? We have different steps and we have different ways or approaches to be able to conduct or gather that data that we need. Once we do that, our final step is to draw conclusions from our data. So once we gather that data, the last step is to analyze our data and see what the data is telling us. Okay, so there are some assumptions when it comes to research process. Everything is open to question. So even though you collect your data and you come up with your results, everything is still open to question. You have to realize that knowledge is provisional. That's another one of the assumptions. And basically, it can be refuted. And evidence is empirical or observation based. So your evidence could be empirical evidence. So this is basically hard evidence that your results is accurate, or it can be observation based. So you can actually observe the behavior and get your answer that way. So you can actually observe something that's going on to collect that data. Okay. What are some barriers to research? Well, there is some mistrust of research. In chapter 2, I think we cover a little bit more of that. But research can be used to justify oppression. So let's talk a little bit about barriers to research. So one of them is mistrust of research. A lot of people don't trust the results. They don't trust research. So, for example, research may be used to justify oppression, and one way that can be done is in the example here that female skull and brain are smaller, therefore females are naturally less intelligent. So basically, they're justifying saying that females are less intelligent by demonstrating that research shows that females' skulls and brains are smaller. Okay? If you really think about it, the research would have to actually show that you did a study and you did a study on both males and females, and maybe the questionnaire could be things about intelligence, right? So your survey questions should be focused on measuring the actual intelligence. Now, intelligence may have nothing to do with the brain or skull, or it may have something to do. But again, that would be a different study. So in order to just make an assumption about something, you need to make sure that you're actually asking the correct questions and you're actually studying the right thing when you're doing that research study. So if you're just justifying that they're less intelligent because your study showed that their brain was smaller, that's not the right way to do it, right? And that's not really accurate. Sometimes research just doesn't reflect social work reality. So for example, women are as violent as men. Do you agree with that statement? So I haven't done much research in this area, but I think lately more and more research is reflecting that, you know, women are also violent, and most of the times when you think of domestic violence, you assume that the men has a problem when in a lot of situations women are the ones that are being violent. So sometimes it may not reflect what your practice is showing. So for example, if you see a lot of clients in domestic violence and all of your perpetrators are men, then the statement of women are as violent as men would not reflect your reality. It would not reflect what you see in your practice every day. And if research is showing that women are as violent as men, but then in your practice you're showing that every client that you have that comes in there for violence has to do with men, then you can see there how it doesn't really reflect what you're actually seeing every day. Research may embarrass the profession. So for example, sometimes your programs may not work. So you can come up with this great idea of an amazing program, and once you evaluate it after some time, you may notice that it wasn't effective, or it just didn't do what you thought it would do, and it just didn't work. And so when that happens, it's kind of embarrassing, or a lot of times agencies don't want to report that. But as social workers, we all have a responsibility for the research questions we ask and the ways that we research findings. Or as social workers, we have a responsibility for the research questions we ask and the ways that research findings may be used or misused. So depending on what we're asking in our study, we have to be careful on how we report the results and how we use evidence to justify our results. So we can't ask one question and then use our results to justify something completely different that we really didn't ask in our research study. Here's the NASW Code of Ethics, and as you can see, it's the part that has to do with evaluation and research, and NASW, basically research is a part of NASW Code of Ethics. So as social workers, you should be involved in research, and you should monitor and evaluate policies, implementation of programs and practice interventions. You should also promote and facilitate evaluation and research to add to your knowledge base. Social workers should definitely examine critically and keep current with emerging knowledge relevant to social work, and also use evaluation and research evidence in their professional practice. So NASW is telling us research is important for social workers in the social work field. And as social workers, you shouldn't just ignore it. You should make sure that you're implementing effective policies, you're evaluating your programs, you're keeping up with the knowledge on specific topics and areas of interest. So basically, research is important. The Council on Social Work Education also provides their own policy on that as well. And one of those is to engage in practice-informed research and research-informed practice. So again, social workers need to understand both approaches of research, right? Quantitative and qualitative research, and making sure that they're keeping up with that knowledge and making sure they're using research to advance their practice as well. Okay, so what are some support for researchers? What are some things or some agencies or what's available in order to support research? There's the Institute for Advancement of Social Work Research. This one promotes social work research funding and dissemination of those findings. And then there's the Society for Social Work Research. This one promotes research through journal social work research, and they also have an annual professional conference. They have this conference every year, and so basically all the universities across the US would come to these conferences and present their research. I did it as a PhD student. I went to present my research. They have it. This is done it just kind of depends. Like they have it in different places, different states in the US. So they come up with a schedule, and it's generally for about I want to say from a Thursday to a Sunday. And they have a full program where they have presentations. They have you can do paper presentations, you can do poster presentations, you can do a round table. And so basically master's level students can also participate in this. They can submit their research, and if it get accepted, they go and they do a presentation on it. So this is a good support for people who are interested in social work research. And for example, if you do plan on going on and getting your PhD one day, this is a good resource for you as well, because you are able to be a part of this and attend some of these conferences and keep up with the research. So agencies getting any type of federal funds must be accountable regarding their results. So let's say your agency started a new program, or even if it's an old program, if your agency is getting federal funding to provide some type of program or services, then they are accountable to provide evidence of those results. So maybe it probably is once a year they have to do an evaluation of those services, or of the they have to do an evaluation of those services or that program, and report the results back to the funder. So basically they shift the focus from the process to the actual outcomes. What is the outcome of that program, right? Not exactly the process about how services are provided or anything like that, but what is the outcome? What is the impact from those services provided? It also provides a trend towards evidence-based practice. So I think I mentioned this earlier about the focus about evidence-based practice. So this kind of helps with that as well. It's a good way to promote research, because in order for you to have an evidence-based practice, you have to do research. You have to make sure you're evaluating those programs and services. And it also helps for you to be able to see what interventions are effective, what interventions actually have evidence based, um, or what interventions are evidence based for you to be able to, to say, well, this is the evidence based program. It shows that there's evidence to back up that this is an effective program. And then lifelong learning is necessary to stay current. So even once you graduate, it's important that you still follow up on research, especially in the area that you're working in, the type of clients that you're seeing, the issues that they're dealing with. It's important that as a social worker, you keep current with what's going on in research regarding those, whether it's a specific program that you use, whether it's your population that you're working with, or whether it's their issues that they're dealing with. It's important that you follow up on research with that and stay current, because even though something may be effective right now, 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, it may not be as effective because things change. And so we have to keep up with that knowledge to make sure that we are making, changes as needed. There's also some student research opportunities. So you can evaluate your own practice. You can do a needs assessment. You can participate in evaluating agency programs. If you are doing an internship right now, you may be able to do, evaluate their program. You may also get the opportunity to write a grant, especially at your internship, depending on the type of agency or the type of internship you're doing. You can also help community groups conceptualize and carry out research. So you can participate in doing research for the community with specific groups, or you can also be a student research assistant. So there are some positions available in each department, and I know in social work we do. Social workers are employed in areas where difficult and life-changing decisions are made on a daily basis. And in order for social workers to make a positive impact, social workers need to have that knowledge about how best to intervene in these problems. They also need the skills to produce new scientifically based knowledge about social problems and most effective ways to address them. So as social workers, you will face difficult situations and having to make difficult life-threatening decisions, and having to make difficult life-changing decisions on a daily basis, and having a knowledge about scientifically based, or having scientifically based knowledge, so basically evidence-based, you are able to make those decisions that you need to make every day. So hopefully after reading this chapter, you guys are familiar a little bit. Hopefully after reading this chapter, you're a little bit more familiar with research and starting to see the importance of research and how it can be used in your agency or in the field of social work. All right, so that's it for chapter 1.